Welcome back to another console collector video. Alright, let's kick off part 5. Up next is Atari's final home console, the Atari Jaguar from 1993. Its original retail price was $249 US, adjusted for inflation, that's $438. The Atari Jaguar is a home video game console that was developed by Atari. The console is the 6th console to be developed under the Atari brand, originally released in North America in November 1993. Atari marketed the Jaguar as being the first 64-bit video game console, when in reality it was just two 32-bit units working together, rather than a single 64-bit unit. The Jaguar competed with several consoles at the time during the infamous console wars, alongside with the Sega Genesis, the SNES, CDI, and the all-new 32-bit 3DO interactive multiplayer platform, which was released the same year as the Jaguar. So this here is the console. Fairly large. It's got nice branding on it. You got your power button here, controller ports here, connections on the back, and then the cartridge slot here on top. Now, one big complaint about the Jaguar was no dust cover on the Jaguar. So if this sat around for a bit, it'd get full of dust, you put your cartridge in, and the game wouldn't work. One of many contributing factors why the Jaguar failed. So Atari attempted to extend the lifespan of the Jaguar with the add-on, the Atari Jaguar CD, which was released in 1995. It retailed for $149 US, with inflation that's $249 US. Marketing was picked up, and the Jaguar was marketed as the new low-cost next-generation console, with a price tag just over $100 less than its competitors. With the release of the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation in 1995, sales of the Jaguar continued to fall, ultimately causing it to be discontinued in 1996. The commercial failure of the Jaguar prompted Atari to leave the video game home console market. The Jaguar was their last video game console. The Jaguar used unique cartridge-based media with an odd handle on top of the cart. The Jag CD used CD-based media, and the Jaguar and the Jag CD all had a large awkward controller with many buttons. So this here is the Atari Jaguar cartridge. It's got a nice label, nice branding on the back, but this is the large weird handle. I guess it makes it easier to pull the cartridges out. So you basically take the cartridge and you pop it in there, power on, and you were playing Jaguar. This here is the Jaguar controller. It's large, it's bulky, not very comfortable. You got 3 action buttons, pause an option, directional pad, and a number of keypad buttons, which you could slide and overlay into here, similar to how the old consoles did it in the 80s. Not sure why Atari was still using that idea, but they did. And the back's got some nice branding on it. Now, the Jaguar CD is this guy right here. Nice branding. Basically, it just plops in to the cartridge port on the Jaguar, and then you'd open it up, pop your CD in. One cool thing you did was you could still play your cartridges through the Jaguar CD. Now this may look kind of strange to you, but the Jaguar got kind of a nickname with the CD add-on, and that would be Toilet. It kind of looks like a toilet, which is kind of perfect for it because it's not a good system. It's kind of crappy. You get the joke. This here is the Jaguar CD case or sleeve, and it's just your traditional disc. Very colorful artwork on it. Then you got some oversized manual here. So the Jaguar had some of the best ports of games, such as Doom and Myst. As you see Doom there, it's actually a fantastic port. It plays well. It's just too bad it's on the Jaguar. The rarest game for the Jaguar is Air Cars. The best seller was Alien vs. Predator. The final game released for the Jaguar was 05. The rarest Jag CD game is Brain Dead 13. Its bestseller was Blue Lightning, and the final Jag CD game released was Iron Soldier 2. So that's going to wrap up the Atari Jaguar and Jag CD from 1993. Let's talk about the rare Amiga CD32 from 1993. Its original retail price was $399 US. Adjusted for inflation, that's $702 US. The Commodore Amiga CD32, codenamed Spellbound, is a 32-bit home video game console developed by Commodore and was released in September 1993. The CD32 was released in Canada and Australia and was planned for release in the United States. Commodore stated the console would launch in the United States in either late February or early March 1994 at the price of $399. However, a deadline was reached for Commodore to pay a $10 million debt in patent royalties. A federal judge ordered an injunction against Commodore, preventing them from importing anything into the United States. Commodore had built up the CD32 inventory in their manufacturing facility in the Philippines for the United States launch, but being unable to sell the consoles, they remained in the Philippines until the debts were settled. Commodore declared bankruptcy shortly after, and the CD32 was never officially sold in the United States. Imported models did come over the border from Canada, and many stores in the United States imported units for domestic sale. The CD32 was a part of a family of Amiga computers and other hardware. It used CD-ROM as its storage medium. It was based on Commodore's Advanced Graphics Architecture chipset, and is a similar specification to the Amiga 1200 computer. Using third-party devices, it is possible to upgrade the CD32 with a keyboard, floppy drive, hard drive, RAM, and mouse, turning it into the equivalent of an Amiga 1200 personal computer. On its release, the CD32 was marketed by Commodore as the world's first 32-bit CD games console. So this is the Amiga CD32. Not a bad looking unit. It's got a disk drive here, top loading. You've got your reset button here. It's got a volume control here and a headphone jack. You've got your controller ports here and some more connections there. And the main power switch is actually on the back, like the computer at the time. The Amiga CD32 had a very unique controller that was surprisingly comfortable. Some games released for the CD32 were Lemmings, Chaos Engine, and the infamous bad game, The Town with No Name. So this here is the Amiga CD32 controller. It's got a circle pad here, action buttons, start, pause button there, a couple of shoulder buttons. You can see it's very oddly shaped. But again, it's surprisingly comfortable for a very odd shape. Now the CD32 had its own line of disc-based games like this here, Chaos Engine, standard discs. But an interesting thing about the CD32 is it actually played CD-TV games, which is another similar Amiga home console, multimedia console. So if you happen to have a Amiga CD32, you can play CD TV games as well as Amiga CD32 games. So that's going to wrap up the Commodore Amiga CD32 from 1993. Here we have the Sega Saturn from 1995. Its original retail price was $399 US. Adjusted for inflation, that's a spooky $666 US. The Sega Saturn is a 32-bit home video game console developed by Sega and released in May 1995 in North America. It's the successor to the successful Sega Genesis. Its games are in CD-ROM format, and its game library contains several arcade ports as well as original games. The Saturn was initially successful in Japan, but failed to sell in large numbers in the United States after its surprise May 1995 launch, 4 months before its scheduled release date. Sega wanted to be the first to market since Sony's debut video game console, the PlayStation, and the mighty N64 were scheduled for release in the near future. After the debut of the N64 in late 1996, the Saturn rapidly lost market share in the US, where it was discontinued in 1998. The Saturn is considered a commercial failure, mainly blamed on the failure of Sega's development teams not releasing a game in the Sonic the Hedgehog series on the Saturn late in the console's life. As well as Sega's management has been criticized for its decisions during the system's development and discontinuation. The Saturn used disc-based media for games. It launched with a 6-button controller similar to the Genesis 6-button controller, and later released the Moon controller with a thumbstick, and was meant for upcoming 3D environment games like Nights into Dreams. Hits like Virtua Cop and Panzer Dragoon made their home on the Saturn. Its rarest game is Knight Rayearth. Its bestseller was Madden NFL 97, and the final game released was In This Hunt. So the games came in this long, big box format like so, with a standard disc, large manuals, nice packaging. The console itself here has a top-loading disk drive. Got your power button here, you got your open there, and then your reset. Got a couple controller ports on the front, all your connections on the back. Got this little optional expansion here. Then you do have a cartridge slot here for compatible cartridges on the Saturn. And then here's the original Saturn controller. 6 buttons similar to the Genesis 6-button. Nice form fitting, not a bad controller. And then they released the 3D controller. This is the Moon controller. So you got a 3-dimensional joystick here, D-pad start, slider button there, and 6 buttons here. You also have 2 trigger buttons here. This controller basically is what inspired the Dreamcast controller. It's very similar in shape, and the triggers are almost virtually the same, and it has the same rocket kind of style. So that's the Sega Saturn Moon controller. And with that said, that's going to wrap up the Sega Saturn from 1995. Up next is the headache-inducing Virtual Boy from 1995. Originally priced at $179 US, adjusted for inflation, that's $299 US. The Virtual Boy was a 32-bit tabletop video game console developed and manufactured by Nintendo and was released in 1995. It was marketed as the first console capable of displaying stereoscopic 3D graphics. The player uses the console similar to a head-mounted display, placing their head against the eyepiece to see a red and black monochrome display. The games use a parallax effect to create the illusion of depth. Sales failed to meet targets, and by early 1996, just 6 months in stores, Nintendo ceased distribution and game development, only ever releasing 14 games for the system in North America. It had plans for a link cable that would allow 2 systems to be linked together, but that was also cancelled due to poor sales and lukewarm reception. Many users of the Virtual Boy stated headaches and eye strain as in little as 15 minutes of gameplay. The system was also marketed as portable, but in reality it was far from portable and a big struggle to play at home, let alone on the go. The Virtual Boy was Nintendo's last attempt at 3D for many years until the 3D re-emerged to more success with the Nintendo 3DS handheld system. The Virtual Boy is Nintendo's second lowest selling platform, only selling better than the ill-fated N64 DD. The Virtual Boy uses slim cartridges for its games and had a unique dual D-pad controller. Despite the small library of games, the Virtual Boy had some decent titles like Nestor's Funky Bowling and Wario Land. The rarest game is Jack Bros. The bestseller was Mario Tennis, which was the packing game, and the final game released was Virtual League Baseball. So we'll start off with, here's what the cartridges look like. Very thin little cartridges. They say Virtual Boy in the back there. Now the controller actually connects to the headpiece. This is the controller. Here's the unique dual D-pads. You got some trigger buttons on the back here. So I'll start select A and B. Now this particular piece on here, you'd actually plug an AC adapter into the controller here. This also slides off and you could put on a battery pack so you could play it on the go. So to play this thing, you have an AC adapter coming out at the bottom here. This is the Virtual Boy itself. Let's just unplug the controller here. So it comes with this stand, so you can basically set it up like so on the table. You go and you'd stick your head into this piece here. As for the actual unit, you got this little dial here. This basically changes the mirrors inside to make it either more blurry or clear. And then this little slider up here changes the depth. On the bottom here, you can see you got your controller port. There was the expansion port that ended up being unused. You got your headphone port here and your volume slider. Cartridges would slide right in the front here, like so. Label down. Sorry, label up. There you go. This thing is pretty awkward. You set it up like that and you'd be ready to go. Now if we look inside the eyepieces here, you can see everything's just red. This is one thing that you really truly have to stick your head in the goggles to get the full experience of the Virtual Boy. This was basically an attempt at virtual reality in 1995. You know, it's nothing like the PS4 VR, that's for sure. But for being 1995, it was a pretty decent attempt. So that's going to wrap up the Virtual Boy from 1995. Alright, that's the end of part 5. Stay tuned to part 6. We're going to take a look at the iconic original PlayStation.